Hello, everybody. Welcome back, to the political segment of Socially Radical Guitars. Song you heard just now was The Contortionists' Early Grave. So very emotional, slow moving, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the music. Very creative musicians. I particularly like that song when I'm in a somber mood. So I'm going to be introducing the guest. The guest is Drew Garvie. He's a member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Canada, and he was also a candidate for the 2021 elections. So hi, Drew. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. So just a little bit of an intro. How long have you been running as a candidate for the Communist Party of Canada? Why have you chosen to run as a communist? And what changes have you seen in the electorate since you first began running?
My first election was when I was in my very early 20s in 2007 for a provincial election. And then I've run in every federal and provincial election since then. And I forget how many that is, but I think that's about 5 federal and about 3 provincial, give or take maybe a couple. And the first few were in Guelph, where I was a student and then working for a few years. So I have, my recent experience in Toronto is a little different in the big city. For example, big city people are just more prone to not want to talk to you and not take your flyer and stuff, no matter what. There's some differences. But no, I would say that since 2007, especially amongst younger people, a lot of the hangovers from the Cold War about hearing the word communist has lifted quite a bit. Still there's a lot of anti-communism in the air. I mean, we're next door to the United States. And also this new stuff with, Chinese communists are under your bed and Trudeau's an agent of Chinese communism. And the virus is both a hoax and a communist conspiracy and stuff like this. That kind of stuff is new. So there's I'd say a kind of hardened minority of anti-communism, but in general, people are more and more seeing the limits of capitalism and the limits of democracy inside a capitalist system. So you can see that even from the voter turnout and the just total lack of inspiration and being generally pissed off with the options on the ballot. I think that kind of characterizes this election in particular. So that brings me to your question about why we run. I mean, we run not necessarily to get elected, although it would be good to have some communists in the House of Commons to be a voice for working people, a more consistent voice than what we have now. But we run in order to talk to people. For better or worse, working people are more receptive to talking about politics during election time. And that's just the way of the world right now. So we want to use that to take advantage of it, get into debates, talk to people on the doorstep in the street, and talk about big ideas, including putting socialism on people's radar. So more or less, that's why we do it. Yeah, I think those are your 3 questions. Does that cover it?
Yeah. That does cover it. So I was looking around social media, I noticed there are a lot of obstacles, particularly in Toronto, to the Communist Party of Canada getting a platform on the debate stage with the other candidates. I know definitely Jennifer Moxie, she seemed to have an issue getting on the debate stage. Was that the case for you as well? And what will be the tactic to get on the debate stage for future elections?
Yeah, so we usually it's not new that we have to fight to get into debates. Quite frankly, people don't know I would say mainly because of the corporate media and the first past the post electoral system. It's not just our party that's shut out of the evening news or whatever. It's a lot of Canada has, I don't know, close to around 20 parties, and people think of, can name maybe 4 or 5. So in a lot of places, the people putting together debates don't just want to exclude the smaller parties. and that's been long-standing, and we fought to be included. Usually, when they hear our platform, they realize that we're serious. You know, we're not just like the Rhinoceros Party or something like that is quite happy to be a joke. That's their whole shtick. We do take politics seriously, and we have something to offer these debates and the public discussion in general that other parties aren't putting forward, and that's a clear class perspective. So, you know, just my experience in Guelph, I was one of the first candidates that we'd run in Guelph for a while, and we slowly would fight each year to get on more debates, and then by the end we would get more. We got more invitations because people would hear from us, and we would pressure certain debate organizers and whatnot. So in Toronto, Jen was our first candidate in Beaches East York for a number of years, which is a good thing. But I think some debate organizers were particularly picky. I should also say that parts of Beaches East York the southern part is probably one of the most affluent areas in Toronto. It's a very mixed riding. So, you know, for example, in Guelph, I never got invited by the Chamber of Commerce. Surprise, surprise. And then in my riding this time, as Chrystia Freeland has gotten bigger and bigger in terms of the government, she feels the need to show up to less and less debates. So I was invited to one public all candidates event this time, and Chrystia Freeland wasn't there, which is too bad. Often the Tories don't show up at all, but including some high profile Liberals don't bother to go to much either. And that for the reason for that is their thinking is that, well, I'm already a name brand. People know me, and I might say something stupid. So I don't want to be caught on video saying something stupid, and that could make the evening news. Well, of course, that's ridiculous. You know, people have a right to hear from all the candidates in their ridings and make an informed decision. And a lot of places they'll say it's an all candidates meeting and it won't include all candidates. So our particular tactic for that is that we show up in person, hand out leaflets to the audience and say, hey, we're being undemocratically excluded. This is an all candidates debate, and we're also on the ballot. We're a registered political party just like everybody else. We have the right to be heard. And then we typically stand up in the front of the room and say, listen, everybody, I'm right here. Look, there's an empty seat up there. The Tory didn't show up because they never do. Wouldn't it be great if the event organizers changed their mind and included me in the debate? And about 50% of the time that works. But of course, during a pandemic election, when all these events are online, that was not possible. So I look forward to the next election. I mean, I really hope we don't have another pandemic election, and that we'll be able to use those kind of tactics to continue to expand, you know, the fact to expand democracy in these kind of debates. And I do think all candidates debates are important, although the trend is moving more and more in the American style of big money in elections, all ad campaigns, all about the leaders, not about the local candidates. We should try and resist that and bring it back more to the local candidates and those kind of community debates, because there is. I'm not singing the virtues of bourgeois democracy 40 years ago or whatever, but it is getting worse in terms of big money.
Oh yeah, so I mean that's definitely something to think about. Talking about the party itself, it looks like the Communist Party was only available as an option in maybe about 26 of the 33 or so ridings across Canada. And that might have impacted the decision of would-be voters. Why was the party spread so thin? Is there a strategy to expand the reach of the party for following elections?
Yes. So, I mean, we've ran, you know, there's more than 300 ridings across the country. We ran in a small minority of ridings, I think, for a long time. We're talking like 70 years here. But we're trying to build that more. But we also want to resist, you know, what we call paper candidates, which is just having somebody on the ballot and not having a campaign around them, which some of the big parties do, by the way. Like the NDP will put a lot of resources, signs, and leaflets into a riding that they think they have a chance of winning, but in some other ridings, they don't even bother printing signs or leaflets, right? So if our goal is to like talk to people and stuff like that, we want to we want to have as strong a campaign as we can on the ground. So it's not all about increasing numbers, but absolutely we do need to increase numbers because people just see it as at the end of the day, it's first past the post system. If we're not polling at a certain level across the country, then you have a very limited chance of winning a particular riding. So yeah, at the end of the day, if we are going to elect somebody, we need to move in that direction. But I will say on the results for the party, and again, it's not, we tell people to vote communist to send the clearest message that fundamental change is needed in the country, and to build the movement towards socialism. But this is you got to have a long-term vision to agree to do that, right? I mean, there is something to be said in the first past the post system that like limits people's imagination to strategic voting, right? I got to vote Liberal to keep the Tory out if you're in that form of and all the ridings are always narrowed down to two candidates, right? In this system, or you got to vote NDP to keep the Liberal out in the case of some Toronto ridings, or big city ridings. So, yeah, I mean, the votes for us is always kind of artificially low, I think, compared to the people that we hear like our platform and agree with us. Like it's not uncommon, Christian, to hear people say like, well, I'm not going to vote for you, but I would like to join your party, which is kind of, totally backwards. So, yeah, I mean, we have been slowly increasing our votes. This one was just in the riding that I ran in, we got 100 more votes than we did last time. And this was the biggest vote for us since the year 2000, which was a time we ran 52 candidates. And that was a decision because we were under the gun. The federal government had brought in legislation to say that if you don't run more than 50 candidates, you're not considered a political party. So in that election, we had a lot of paper candidates because that was a strategic decision at that time. And we got, around the same number of votes as we did when we had double the amount of candidates in that election. And we got the highest per candidate vote since 1974. So I know we're talking about small numbers, and we're in the end days of capitalism here, and we need to grow quickly because of the political situation we're in. But yeah, for having 26 campaigns across the country, I think we did make an impact.
Yeah. I mean, definitely was a tough election. Interestingly enough, there a lot of permanent residents, refugees that can't vote, that still can technically join the party. Something to think about. So that is a tough election. It is a tough election. So is there a silver lining, like when you're looking at growth and other aspects of the party and its performance?
Well, let's talk quickly about the overall election outcome, because I think that's a silver lining. I do think that although this election was particularly terrible with kind of how uninspiring and quite frankly boring it was, just in terms of the actual election debate. I mean, you had the Liberal Party offering childcare, not much else, and also saying like, well, you don't want the Tories because we know that they're anti-vaxxers and ultra-right, tied to the ultra-right, which is true. And then you had the Tories being like, no, we're not. That's basically it. And then you had the NDP saying, well, tax the rich, which is refreshing a little bit, I have to say, because they haven't said that in quite a long time. But when you scratch the surface, their policies were not much different than the Liberal Party. I mean, in terms of just their income tax proposals, for example, not that much different than the Liberal Party. And they're expanding healthcare to include dental and eye care and stuff like that. That was all means tested, which basically means Liberal Party, classic neoliberal scheme, which the Liberal Party is always putting forward. Like all these loopholes in this new social program that they're putting forward. And then, of course, you had the People's Party, which was there. I guess there was nothing boring about the People's Party campaign, actually, but it was actually very terrifying what they were able to accomplish this election. And they are a fascist and racist outfit here. or at least they have many fascists inside, and their platform is definitely racist and xenophobic. And they've made a lot of hay in terms of organizing the anti-vaxxer, anti-passport, anti-lockdown stuff. So they got 800,000 votes across the country, which is not good. But the silver lining, going back to it, is that at the end of the day, okay, terrible election, but at the end of the day, in terms of all the possible realistic outcomes, and communist majority was not a possible realistic outcome. Sorry, Christian. But a liberal minority does mean that, and there's already all this push from the business community to get the liberals to continue canceling CERB, like all this stuff, like, oh, there's a labor shortage and people are getting lazy and all this crap. And there's going to be a real push towards austerity now. And that's going to be more difficult for the Liberals to carry out because they've got a minority government. So if they do things that are really unpopular, which austerity, they usually like doing things that are really unpopular when they have majority governments. And if working people can get organized, and if different movements can come together, the labor movement, anti-racist movements, Indigenous sovereignty movements, the climate movement, which has a big march today, by the way. If people can come together and say, no, we're not going to take it, and we demand a different way forward, then the Liberals will be unable to carry out their agenda, which is not the one they ran on. But if you look at the past, there's plenty of instances of the Liberals running to the left, to the center left, and then moving in a center right or right wing direction. So that's what needs to be blocked right now. So that's the silver lining. And then the silver lining for the party, I think, is that, we are growing. We've had about a 50% increase in membership in the last year or so. And it was a chance for a lot of new people to get together, just get basic experiences, handing out flyers, working together, getting to know each other. There's been a lot of Zoom meetings over the last year. So it was a real chance to kind of consolidate that growth. And we'll have a lot more opportunities. We're going to be talking about a campaign for housing in the province of Ontario. So this has been a major issue during the election, and will be beyond, because there was really no solutions put forward in the election. We got a campaign for mass construction of social housing, rent rollbacks. So this will be a major campaign in Ontario leading up to the provincial election in the spring. And then we have municipal elections across Ontario next fall. And of course, all the ongoing struggles with the Ford government, which is particularly reactionary, and the new Liberal government in Ottawa. So there'll be a lot more going forward that I think the election, although, obviously we're a small party, it did set us up for being able to do more in terms of the extra parliamentary struggle immediately.
Okay. So I guess that is the silver lining. I guess that it does tie in a little bit to the next question, but what do you feel will be the impact towards like Canada's relationship with the rest of the world, like the foreign relations and with this particular government? I mean, it's a minority government, the same one that we had, since 2015. So just, 2019, I think. Yeah. So just a little bit more of an understanding of what Canada's foreign policy is going to look like. What do you foresee?
I foresee more of the same, unless there's a serious intervention by the peace movement, which needs to be a lot stronger in this country. So, I mean, just 2015, Trudeau was elected in part on some promises around foreign policy to move in a peaceful direction. And that didn't happen at all. I mean, we saw pretty much right across the board entire continuity with the Harper government. And that included promises to NATO to raise the military budget by billions of dollars, the fighter jet purchases, which is, tens of billions of dollars, the new warship ships they're buying, which is tens of billions of more dollars there. So all these tens of billions of dollars could be going into social programs at a time where working people increasingly forced into poverty. And then you have the foreign policy. So Chrystia Freeland, who was the MP in the riding that I ran in, she was the foreign minister for a few years, and she adopted a very aggressive foreign policy when it comes to Venezuela, for example. Canada was not just kind of tailing the US, but out there in front in terms of the intervention against Venezuela. And that included, recognizing a totally fictitious president in the country, getting together this Lima group, which includes some of the worst human rights abusers in the hemisphere, including Colombia, Brazil, Honduras, which is a coup government. So, just those kinds of examples, increasing sanctions against Nicaragua, Venezuela, Russia, selling arms to Saudi Arabia, and then being like, oh, maybe we should review it. Oh, yeah, there's no problem there. Let's continue selling arms to Saudi Arabia during a genocidal war in Yemen. So I could go on and on, but the point is that this government is not in any way pro-peace government. It is not in any way, what Canada projects itself as a peacekeeping country, which has always been largely fictitious. But anyways, we're moving in a more and more aggressive direction in terms of being involvement in U.S. military campaigns, and including on China. So this is particularly concerning in a world that seems to be intent on moving into a new Cold War, or the West is intent on moving into a new Cold War. Looks like today the news is that Meng Wanzhou will be released. And I don't really know what to say about that because I'm just reading the headlines. But I will say that it's been, 2 or 3 years now that Meng Wanzhou has been detained. And that was, arresting a high profile Chinese business leader at the behest of the US government. Trump just asked us to, and we did it. And in Trump's words, that was for him to bargain economically with China. Our government says, no, that's not why we did it. But anyways, I might as well take Trump's word for it. The result is increasingly strained tensions with China, which is one of our biggest trading partners. So we need to move very quickly to a multilateral trade, mutually beneficial trade, and away from this kind of lockstep approach with the US, which is all tied into the North American Free Trade Agreement, or what is now the USMCA. We need to get out of these free trade agreements with the US. We need to get out of military pacts with the US, especially NATO, and we need to distance ourselves from US foreign policy. And that means an independent foreign policy of peace and disarmament. But that's not going to happen without a major boost to peace forces in this country. So we really do need to get organized to demand better. So that includes divesting from war, divesting from the military, and moving that spending into social services, into the fight against climate change, for example. The military is a major polluter in terms of emissions of CO2s. So I think it is possible, and we need to link these struggles together. But I wish I could say, we were talking about silver linings, and maybe the government will have its arm behind its back, but that'll only happen if there is a peace movement that is fighting back in the country.
Okay, so would you say that that's the next major plan for the party, to initiate a peace movement?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we never stopped being involved in the peace movement, but it has dwindled, obviously. And we're involved in the Canadian, or we work inside the Canadian Peace Congress with other people too. So this is an anti-imperialist organization across Canada. It's got a 70-year history. And we want to organize more local chapters and do more mobilizing with the Peace Congress, but also with the broader peace movement. So that includes pro-peace forces that aren't necessarily anti-imperialist, could include faith-based organizations or organizations from whatever immigrant group that the West is now targeting, because that changes from day to day. But anyways, so yeah, there's a lot to be done, and we got to do it on a local level too. So I know there used to be a Guelph Peace Alliance, and there used to be a KW Stop the War or something like that. Those are the kind of organizations we need to revitalize and work on, including also solidarity with other countries. So not just peace in general, but solidarity with particular countries as well.
Nice. So I think yeah, great talk, great talk, great explaining, the state of the party and the plans for the future. Um, it was sad that didn't get a seat, but on to the next one. Keep trying, right? Eventually you'll win. Um, so yeah, we're gonna be ending the interview, and we're gonna be going out first with the outro, and then with the song that Drew picked. What's the song, Drew?
Yeah, can I introduce it or give a little why I picked it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so this is Ali Primera. He was a communist in Venezuela, a musician. I think he was trained in, or somewhat musically trained in East Germany too. Um, and then he died in an accident, I think in the 70s or 80s, or no, it must have been the 80s. Um, so he's kind of a hero, although he wasn't around for the Bolivarian Revolution, when Chavez came to power. He is kind of still the soundtrack to it. So this is dedicated to Chrystia Freeland, who has been instrumental in targeting Venezuela, and it's mostly in Spanish, but it does have a good Yankee go home, Gringo go home chorus in there. So
Nothing like spite. I appreciate it. All right, so we'll have the outro, and then we'll have Ali Primera's song. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one. See you next week.